Welcome to Volume and Vision. Have you ever made a promise to yourself in the morning and broken that promise before the day was over? Perhaps you told yourself that today you would finally study seriously. You would stop wasting time on your phone. You would eat healthier. You would exercise. You would finish the work you had been avoiding for days. And for a while you actually believed it. Then one small distraction appeared. You checked your phone for a moment. You watched one short video. You ate something you had promised yourself you would avoid. You postponed one task until later. And somehow later became tomorrow. The strange thing is that you knew exactly what you wanted. You knew what would be better for your future. You even knew what you should be doing at that very moment. So why did you do the opposite? This question takes us directly into one of the most fascinating battles happening inside the human mind. The battle between what we want right now and what we truly want in the long run. This is the world of willpower. And understanding willpower can change the way you look at your habits, your failures, your goals, and even yourself. Because perhaps you are not as lazy as you think. Perhaps you are not weak. Perhaps you have simply been trying to use willpower without understanding how it works. Kelly McGonigal explores this problem in her book The Willpower Instinct, and one of the most important ideas is that self-control is not simply about forcing yourself to say no. It is about learning how your mind responds to temptation, stress, emotions, rewards, and the people around you. Once you understand those forces, controlling your behavior becomes much easier. Think about an ordinary day. You wake up and your first decision is already waiting. Do you get out of bed immediately or stay there for another 10 minutes? Then comes breakfast. Should you eat what is healthy or choose what is convenient? Then your phone begins demanding attention. Should you focus on your work or check what happened online? Later you become tired. Your concentration falls. Something difficult appears in front of you. And suddenly your brain offers a very attractive alternative. Take a break. Watch something. Eat something. Do it tomorrow. You deserve some rest. None of these thoughts sound dangerous. That is what makes them powerful. Temptation rarely arrives announcing that it is going to damage your future. It usually arrives disguised as comfort. Just 5 minutes. Just one episode. Just one purchase. Just one snack. Just tonight. And the problem is that the immediate reward is real. The future consequence is only an idea. If you choose entertainment now, you immediately feel entertained. If you choose unhealthy food, you immediately experience its taste. If you spend money, you immediately experience the excitement of buying something. But if you study for 3 hours, the reward may not arrive until the examination. If you exercise today, the result may not appear for months. If you save money, the benefit may only become obvious years later. The brain therefore faces a difficult calculation. Comfort now or benefit later. And in moments of weakness, now can feel much more important than later. Imagine a student named Rohan. Rohan has an examination coming in 3 weeks. He knows that studying every evening would make the examination much easier. But tonight he is tired. He looks at his books. Then he looks at his phone. The phone offers something immediate. The book offers something delayed. Rohan tells himself that he will study after 20 minutes. 20 minutes later, another video appears. Then another. Eventually it is midnight. Rohan feels guilty. He promises that tomorrow will be different. The next evening the same. Battle begins again. Now here is the important question. Is Rohan lacking intelligence? No. Is he lacking ambition? Probably not. His problem is that his immediate environment is constantly offering rewards that compete with his long-term goal. And this is where willpower becomes more complicated than simply trying harder. We often imagine disciplined people as people who can resist anything. But real self-control is often less dramatic. Sometimes it means removing the temptation before you have to fight it. If your phone constantly distracts you while studying, you can keep it somewhere else. If you spend too much money when you browse shopping websites, you can make it harder to access them. If you eat too many unhealthy snacks when they are sitting beside you, you can stop keeping them within easy reach. This may look like weakness. It is actually intelligent self-control. Why fight a battle every hour when you can change the battlefield? Your environment is constantly teaching your brain what to do. Make something easy and you are more likely to do it. Make something difficult and you are less likely to do it. This is why the smallest changes around you can sometimes produce larger changes in behavior than motivational speeches. But there is another enemy of willpower that most people underestimate: stress. When you are calm, you may make excellent decisions. When you are overwhelmed, exhausted and anxious, the same decision can suddenly become much harder. Think about the difference between saying no to a dessert after a peaceful morning and saying no after a terrible day. After a stressful day, the dessert does not simply look like food. It looks like relief. And this is important because many behaviors that we call bad habits are not really about the object itself. They are about what the object promises. Food promises comfort. Social media promises stimulation. Shopping promises excitement. Sleeping promises escape. Procrastination promises temporary relief from discomfort. The brain learns these connections. You feel stressed. You perform the behavior. You feel better for a short time. Your brain remembers. Stress equals this behavior. The next time stress appears, the urge becomes stronger. This is how a habit can slowly turn into an automatic response. And then people often make another mistake. They attack themselves. They say, I have no discipline. I always fail. Something is wrong with me. But self-criticism does not necessarily create better self-control. Sometimes it creates more stress. And more stress can create more temptation, which creates another failure, which creates more guilt, and suddenly you are trapped inside a cycle that you created without realizing it. There is a better response. Notice what happened. Instead of saying I am a failure, say I made a decision that did not match my goal. Those two statements sound similar, but they are psychologically very different. The first attacks your identity. The second gives you information. One says the story is over. The other says you can make another decision. And that next decision is incredibly important, because one mistake does not have to determine the rest of your day. Imagine you planned to eat healthy but ended up eating something unhealthy. You can stop there, or you can think, I already ruined my diet, so I might as well eat everything I want today. That second thought is far more damaging than the original mistake. The same thing happens with studying. You waste 1 hour, then you think the entire day is already ruined, so you waste another 5 hours. The first mistake was 1 hour. The second mistake was turning that hour into an excuse for the entire day. This is one of the hidden dangers of self-control. We sometimes believe that if we cannot be perfect, there is no point continuing. But progress does not require perfection. It requires recovery, the ability to return to the path after stepping away from it. This is why a strong person is not necessarily someone who never gives in. A strong person may simply be someone who notices the mistake sooner and returns faster. There is another fascinating trap that can quietly destroy our goals. Doing something good can sometimes make us feel entitled to do something harmful. Suppose you exercise for an hour. You feel proud. Then your mind says you earned a large unhealthy meal. Suppose you save money for several weeks. Then you tell yourself that you deserve an expensive purchase. Suppose you study for 3 hours. Then you reward yourself with hours of meaningless scrolling. The problem is not that rewards are always bad. The problem is the story we tell ourselves about them. We start treating good behavior like a license for bad behavior. I exercised, so I can eat whatever I want. I studied, so I can waste the rest of the evening. I worked hard, so I can spend whatever I want. This creates a strange cycle where progress and self-sabotage become connected. The better solution is to recognize the achievement without using it as permission to abandon the larger goal. You can be proud of exercising without needing to cancel its benefit. You can be proud of studying without turning the rest of the evening into wasted time. You can be proud of saving money without immediately spending it. This leads to a much deeper question. What are you actually trying to achieve? Because sometimes the thing we are chasing is not the thing we truly want. We think we want the new phone. But perhaps what we really want is recognition. We think we want the expensive meal. But perhaps what we really want is comfort. We think we want to spend the entire evening watching videos. But perhaps what we really want is to escape from stress. We think we want success. But perhaps what we really want is security, freedom or respect. Understanding the deeper desire can change the decision. Because the immediate reward may satisfy the surface desire without solving the real problem. You can eat when you are lonely and still feel lonely afterward, when you are stressed and still remain stressed. You can scroll for hours when you are unhappy and discover that the unhappiness is still waiting when you put the phone down. This is why willpower is not simply about denying pleasure. It is about becoming better at recognizing what kind of reward you are actually looking for. Sometimes you do not need another distraction. You need rest. Sometimes you do not need food. You need comfort. Sometimes you do not need entertainment. You need to deal with the problem you are avoiding. And sometimes you do not need more motivation at all. You simply need to begin. Because the hardest moment is often not the middle of the task. It is the moment before starting. The mind looks at a difficult task and imagines all the discomfort that is coming. So it searches for escape. But once you begin, the task often becomes less frightening. The first step is therefore incredibly powerful. Not because it solves everything, but because it changes you from someone thinking about action into someone taking action. And this is where the real meaning of willpower begins. Willpower is not the absence of temptation. It is the ability to experience temptation without automatically obeying it. You can feel the urge to check your phone and still keep working. You can feel the desire to quit and still continue for another 10 minutes. You can feel nervous and still make the difficult call. You can feel tired and still choose what matters. You do not have to eliminate the feeling. You only have to create enough distance between the feeling and the action. That small space is where choice exists. And once you start noticing that space, you begin to understand something powerful. A thought is not an order. A craving is not a command. An emotion is not a decision. And an impulse does not have to become an action. You can notice it, you can understand it, and then you can choose what happens next. But there is still another question. Why does simply trying not to think about something often make us think about it even more? Why does telling yourself not to eat something sometimes make the food seem even more attractive? Why does trying not to think about your phone make you suddenly notice every notification? And why can one small failure sometimes turn into complete surrender? The answer takes us deeper into one of the strangest patterns of self-control. And understanding this pattern may completely change the way you deal with your next temptation. This is where one of the strangest problems with self-control appears. The more you try to force yourself not to think about something, the more your mind may keep checking whether you are thinking about it. Tell yourself not to think about chocolate, and suddenly chocolate becomes impossible to ignore. Tell yourself not to check your phone, and you may become strangely aware of every notification. Tell yourself not to worry, and your mind starts asking whether you are still worrying. This happens because controlling a thought is not the same as deleting it. When you tell yourself that something is forbidden, your mind has to keep monitoring it. And that monitoring can keep the temptation alive. This is why simply saying "I will never do this again" is sometimes not enough. You need to understand what happens after the first slip. Imagine you are trying to follow a strict eating plan. You walk into a party and decide that you will not eat dessert. For the first hour, everything is fine. Then you see a plate of your favorite sweets. You resist. You walk away. But the thought remains. Just one would not matter. Eventually you take one. And now something changes. Instead of thinking "I made one small exception," you think "I have already failed." So you eat another. Then another. This is the what the hell effect. One small mistake becomes a reason to abandon the entire goal. The dangerous part is that the original temptation may have been small. The real damage comes from the story you tell yourself afterward. If you believe one mistake means total failure, then a small mistake can become a major collapse. But imagine responding differently. You eat one sweet. You notice it. You do not make excuses. You do not punish yourself. You simply say "that was not part of my plan," and then you return to the plan. The story ends there. One decision does not need to control the next decision. This principle can be applied almost everywhere. You missed one workout. That does not mean you have stopped exercising. You wasted one evening. That does not mean you have to waste the entire week. You spent more money than planned. That does not mean you should continue spending. You lost your temper. That does not mean you have to remain angry for the rest of the day. The ability to restart quickly may be more valuable than the ability to maintain perfection. And there is another reason people lose control. They confuse punishment with discipline. When we fail, we often become harsh with ourselves. We think guilt will force us to improve. Sometimes it does the opposite. Guilt creates emotional discomfort, and emotional discomfort creates a desire for relief. Then we return to the very behavior that caused the problem. This creates a loop. I failed. I feel terrible. I want relief. I give in again. Now I feel even worse. The solution is not to celebrate every mistake. It is to respond to mistakes intelligently. You can be honest without being cruel to yourself. You can admit that a decision was bad without deciding that you are a bad person. That distinction matters because self-compassion is not the same as giving yourself permission to do anything. It means being capable of looking at failure without turning it into an excuse for another failure. Now think about something else that quietly affects willpower. Sleep. Most people think of sleep as simply a period when the body rests. But poor sleep can also change the way you make decisions. When you are exhausted, difficult tasks feel more difficult. Temptations feel more attractive, and immediate rewards can become harder to resist. This is why someone may create a perfect plan at night and completely abandon it the following day after sleeping badly. The plan did not suddenly become meaningless. The person making the decision is operating with fewer resources. This is also why trying to solve every problem through discipline can be a mistake. Sometimes what looks like a motivation problem is actually an exhaustion problem. Sometimes you do not need to push harder. You need to recover. Rest is not the enemy of productivity. Without recovery, productivity eventually becomes much harder. The same principle applies to stress. When your mind is constantly under pressure, it naturally searches for quick relief. And quick relief often comes from behaviors that require almost no effort. Scrolling, snacking, shopping, gaming, watching videos, avoiding difficult tasks. These behaviors are attractive because they change how you feel immediately. But immediate relief is not always genuine recovery. There is an important difference between escaping discomfort and resolving it. Imagine you are worried about an important assignment. You avoid thinking about it by watching videos. For the next hour, your anxiety decreases. But the assignment is still there. When you stop watching, the anxiety returns. And now there is less time remaining. So you watch more. The behavior gave you relief but made the original problem larger. This is why willpower becomes easier when you learn to identify what your brain is actually asking for. If you are tired, rest may help. If you are lonely, connection may help. If you are overwhelmed, simplifying the task may help. If you are anxious about a difficult project, taking the first small step may help. If you are bored, endless entertainment may not solve the deeper problem. The goal is not to become someone who never wants comfort. The goal is to stop confusing temporary escape with genuine solutions. Another powerful idea is that your surroundings do not merely influence your behavior. Other people influence it too. Human beings are social creatures. We constantly observe what other people are doing and unconsciously learn what seems normal. If everyone around you stays up until 3 in the morning, sleeping early may feel unusual. If everyone around you constantly orders expensive food, spending carefully may feel strange. If your friends regularly exercise, exercise can begin to feel normal. If the people around you are serious about their careers, their habits can influence your own standards. This means your social environment can either make self-control easier or harder. Consider a person named Neha. Neha decides she wants to become healthier. But every evening her closest friends order fast food and spend hours sitting together. Nobody tells her to join them. She simply sees the behavior repeatedly. Eventually it becomes normal. Now imagine she joins a group where people exercise regularly and encourage one another. Suddenly, healthy behavior becomes normal too. The important lesson is not that you should abandon everyone who has different habits. It is that you should become aware of the behavior you repeatedly expose yourself to. Because repetition changes what feels normal. And what feels normal becomes easier to imitate. This can work in your favor. You can deliberately spend more time around people who make your desired behavior feel ordinary. If you want to read more, spend time with readers. If you want to build something, spend time with people who create. If you want to become more disciplined, spend time with people who take their commitments seriously. You do not have to copy their entire life. Sometimes simply seeing a behavior repeatedly is enough to make it feel more achievable. But social influence can also work in the opposite direction. Someone else give in to temptation can make your own temptation stronger. You see someone eating something unhealthy. Suddenly you want it too. Someone checks their phone during a conversation. You feel the urge to check yours. Someone makes an impulsive purchase. You begin questioning whether you should buy something too. This is why willpower is not purely individual. Your decisions exist inside an environment filled with other people's decisions. And that leads to an interesting responsibility. Your behavior can influence someone else too. When you become more disciplined, you may make discipline feel possible for another person. When you build healthy routines, someone around you may copy them. When you keep a commitment even when it is difficult, someone watching you may learn that difficult things can be completed. Your self-control can therefore become contagious. But there is still a major question. What should you actually do when temptation appears? One useful approach is to stop fighting the feeling directly. Instead of saying I must not want this, notice the desire. There is a difference between experiencing an urge and obeying an urge. Suppose you want to check your phone while studying. Instead of immediately reaching for it, pause. Notice the sensation. Notice the thought. Notice how strongly your mind is asking for the reward. Then wait. You do not have to promise yourself that you will never check your phone again. You only need to create a small delay between the urge and the action. That delay gives your rational mind time to participate. The same technique can be used with anger. You receive a message that makes you furious. Your first impulse is to reply immediately. But if you wait, the intensity may change. You may still be angry. But now you have choices. You can respond. You can wait. You can ask for clarification. You can decide that the argument is not worth your energy. The emotion did not disappear. Your relationship with the emotion changed. This is the essence of mindful self-control. You observe what is happening without immediately becoming controlled by it. And this is especially useful because urges are temporary. A craving can feel permanent when you are inside it. But feelings rise and fall. If you can remain present without immediately acting, the intensity often changes. Think about a wave in the ocean. You cannot command the wave not to exist. But you also do not have to drown in it. You can allow it to rise, reach its peak, and eventually fall. Temptation can work in a similar way. The urge arrives. Your mind produces reasons. Your body experiences the desire. And then, if you do not automatically feed the cycle, the intensity can change. This is why creating a pause is so powerful. The pause turns reaction into choice. And choice is what willpower is really about. Another useful strategy is to focus on what you are moving toward rather than only what you are trying to avoid. Instead of saying I cannot eat this, think about why you want to take care of your health. Instead of saying I cannot waste time, think about what you want to accomplish with that time. Instead of saying I cannot spend this money, remember what financial freedom means to you. Instead of saying I cannot quit, remember why you started. Your brain responds differently when there is a meaningful reason behind the restriction. You are no longer simply losing something. You are choosing something more valuable. This is a crucial difference. Discipline becomes easier when sacrifice has meaning. A person training for a marathon does not see every difficult run as punishment. They see it as part of becoming capable of finishing the race. A student preparing for an important examination may not enjoy every hour of study. But the discomfort has a purpose. Someone saving for a house may occasionally want to spend money. But the larger goal gives the sacrifice meaning. When your future becomes vivid enough, the present temptation becomes easier to evaluate. And this is where imagining your future can become powerful. Close your eyes and imagine yourself several months from now. You followed your plan. You became healthier. You learned the skill. You passed the examination. You saved the money. You finished the project. Now imagine the opposite. You kept postponing. You kept giving in. You kept choosing comfort. The difference between these futures is often created by decisions that seem tiny today. One evening does not feel important. One workout does not feel important. One study session does not feel important. One unnecessary purchase does not feel important. But repeated decisions eventually become a life. Your future is not created by one dramatic moment. It is shaped by hundreds of ordinary choices. And this is why willpower matters. Not because every decision is life-changing, but because repeated small decisions eventually become your habits. And your habits eventually influence who you become. So perhaps the question is not, how can I force myself to be disciplined every day? A better question is, how can I make the right choice easier to repeat? Make the environment support you. Understand your triggers. Protect your sleep. Manage your stress. Surround yourself with people who reinforce the person you want to become. Pause before acting on strong impulses. And when you fail, recover quickly instead of turning one mistake into a complete collapse. Most importantly, stop expecting yourself to feel motivated before you act. Motivation is unpredictable. Some mornings you will feel inspired. Other mornings you will feel nothing. Discipline begins when you learn that action does not always require motivation. You can feel tired and still begin. You can feel nervous and still try. You can feel tempted and still wait. You can feel uncertain and still take the next step. This is not about becoming a machine. It is about becoming someone who can act according to values even when emotions are pulling in another direction. And perhaps that is the most encouraging message of all. You do not need perfect willpower. You need practice. Every time you pause before reacting, you practice. Every time you return after a mistake, you practice. Every time you choose your long-term goal over a temporary reward, you practice. Every time you make your environment support your goals, you practice. And slowly, the decision that once felt impossible begins to feel more familiar. Not because temptation disappeared, but because you became better at responding to it. Your mind will still offer excuses. Your emotions will still change. Stress will still arrive. Temptation will still appear. There will still be days when you make decisions you regret. That is part of being human. The goal is not to win every battle. The goal is to understand the battle well enough that one loss does not convince you to surrender the entire war. Because the strongest form of willpower is not saying no to everything. It is knowing what deserves your yes. Your time, your health, your relationships, your learning, your goals, your future, your attention. These are limited resources. Every time you give them to something, you are choosing not to give them somewhere else. So the next time you find yourself standing between what feels good now and what matters later, pause for a moment. Ask yourself what you really want. Not what feels attractive for the next 10 minutes. Not what will provide the fastest relief. But what kind of person you want to become. Then make the next decision from that place. You may still struggle. You may still fail. But you will no longer be fighting blindly. And that is where real self-control begins. Thank you for listening to Volume and Vision. If you found this journey useful, subscribe to Volume and Vision for more thoughtful book insights and ideas that can help you understand yourself, improve your habits and build a better future. And remember, you do not have to control every thought. You do not have to eliminate every temptation. You simply have to learn that between an impulse and an action, there is a moment. And inside that moment, you have a choice.